So it is a pleasure to be with all of you. I am thrilled to be able to study with you and thrilled to be able to welcome our teacher, our guest teacher for this week, who is Rabbi Chaya Bender. She's the rabbi at B'nai Israel congregation in Wilmington, North Carolina. As a former North Carolinian, I feel a connection with other fellow North Carolina rabbis. She is committed to fostering inclusivity and equity in her congregation and is a wonderful teacher. And so I would love to invite all of you to just put your names and locations into the chat, both for each other and also so that Rabbi Bender knows a little bit about who we are. If you have comments or thoughts along the way, as always, you can put them into the chat, or you can raise your hand or wave wildly at us, and either Rabbi Bender or I will see you. I look forward to our conversation. So please join me in the blessing for study, and then we're going to begin. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Eternal One, whose mitzvot make our lives holy, and who commands us to immerse ourselves, to engage ourselves in words of Torah. And I'll turn it right over to Rabbi Chaya Bender.
Hello. Yes, there will be a test. No, this is my office. We have a blackboard in my office, and one day the seventh graders had to meet in here, and they put this fantastic thing about Moses and Mount Sinai, and there's just a question, where is God? And I just don't have the heart to erase it. It's just a good reminder, where is God? Where is God for me today? Oh my goodness, you're from all over the place. I'm from Atlantic City, New Jersey originally. I'm from South Jersey. My wife is from Needham, Massachusetts. My sister lived in Ontario. I feel like I'm very connected to a lot of you here, and it's wonderful to meet you. And yes, I'm in Wilmington, North Carolina, and I've been here the past 4 years. I'm not a native, but I made a native North Carolinian who sounds like she's from North Carolina, and I'm very excited about that. I feel like I've accomplished something in my life. So today I'm very honored to be here, and I wanted to talk about the Tikvah, the hope of personal resilience. I will be sharing a screen, hopefully successfully, and I might take it down and up just to see your faces, and I hope this will be very interactive. Please don't be shy. And so here we go. I think that worked. I want to make it so I can. Hooray. Thank you for the round of applause. I really appreciate it. Now I lost my mouse. So, oh well, I was trying to see that I could see you all, so I might not be able to do that. So we're talking about the Tikvah of personal resilience, and B'Yisrael is the subtitle, and you'll see what that means a little bit later, unless you speak Hebrew or know enough that mother, Ima, Yisrael, Israel. What does it mean to be a mother in Israel? If I use terms like father, mother, they're just, you can insert whatever parent gender is meaningful to you. So hope in yourself. So I want you to think of a time that you had to rely on only you. And how did you find the strength to rise to the occasion? So you had no support, no active support, that something was tough, times are hard, and you had to rely on your own strength. So you're welcome to, I can't really see everyone. You're welcome to either generate the chat, or that might make sense, or to unmute and share just a second. But think of a time you had to rely on only you. How did you find the strength to rise to the occasion? So let's generate the chat, I suppose. Let's see. I don't see anything in the chat. Is it hard? I see Ojai, California. Right. So maybe just think about that. That's a really big question. It's almost unfair to start with, but just to think about, what is a time that you had to rely on only you, and maybe just continue to think about that as you go forward with this. Okay, you can see this again. All right. So what I'm going to start with is talking about our really sorry to tell you, terrible father figures of our Bible, and using them as how we can break that cycle and find our own personal resilience. So we have this quote from Sigmund Freud: "I cannot think of any need in childhood as strong as a need for a father's protection." Again, insert any parent there. So clearly, in the origins of psychology, there's this belief from Sigmund Freud that we need protection, that we need the generation above us, we need those that were empowered to protect us and help us find our own resilience. But also, when we look at our Torah, we notice we don't really have that. So I'll introduce you to some friends. So this is Lamech. This is going way back to early days of Hebrew school. This is Noah's daddy. So in this picture, you have Lamech picking up this baby and going, "Oh, thank God." And why is Lamech saying, "Oh, thank God"? Because Lamech is a descendant of Cain, as in Cain and Abel. Cain, who had the curse carried on forever. That's going to go from his children forever. We're going to have this curse, this mark of Cain, because Cain killed his own brother and then is forced to work, to till the land, to no longer be given all of God's infinite blessings, but has to work through one's own hand, and that's passed on generation to generation. So Lamech has this kid, and in a role reversal, names him Noah, who says, this child, this little infant who's innocent, this is the one who will comfort us in our work, right? This child, I don't have to put in any personal work. I'm going to put it to the next generation that this child, he's going to be the one that's going to help us, that's going to take the burden from that we've been given so far. He's going to break this cycle. But as we see, that's an unfair burden, because does anyone remember what happens to Noah? A lot of things happen to Noah. Other than the ark, right? The first thing he does when he leaves the ark is he builds a vineyard and he gets drunk, right? So clearly there's some issues, right? Clearly he had some issues in his life. Moving on to another buddy, Terach. This is the father of Abraham. A lot of us might know of this almost whimsical story of Abraham and the idols that's not actually in the Bible, but is in our Jewish fan fiction known as Midrash, where Terach says, "Hey, Abraham or Avram, can you watch the shop? I'm going to go out for a second and grab a burger, you know?" And Abraham smashes all the idols and puts the club in the bigger one's hand. And Terach is like, "Hey, why did you break the idols?" And Abraham says, "I didn't do it. It was that guy with the club, you know?" And Terach says, "Idols can't do that." And Abraham goes, "Haha, I caught you, right? These can't possibly be gods." But that's not the ending of the story. For the ending of the story is quite tragic. What Terach does, what Abraham's dad does, is he grabs him and hands him over to the authorities, to Nimrod, to be killed. That's the ending of this story. So here we have a father figure that clearly, instead of using this as an educational moment, passes on, again, more trauma to the next generation. Abraham, look at the picture. we know Abraham has issues. Abraham has issues. Banished one child, tried to sacrifice the other child. Much to be said about either of those stories, of course, but what's interesting to me, looking at family lines one generation to the next, is that after what happens with Ishmael, after what happens with Isaac, they leave, and we don't see Isaac or Ishmael coming together until to bury their father. They're kind of, the stories disappear, and then you see this funeral. So we know this happens in all kinds of families where people might lose connection, and then, okay, I'll show up to your funeral. And we see this happening even with Abraham. There's not as soon as you see in Bereshit Rabbah, as soon as Isaac and Abraham are done with this ritual, the text goes, "All right, where did Isaac go? Yitzchak, Echan, right? Where'd he go?" His story disappears. And of course, we have Isaac, our traumatized father, who has been through this ordeal, who I don't want to metaphorize his disability, but there's lots to be said about how he just becomes a shell of himself, even onto his deathbed, and he loses a lot of his power. And we have Jacob, who very much has 1.5 million children, right? 13 to be exact, but is very absent in a lot of their lives, especially after the supposed death of his favorite son, he really just completely falls into himself, and even though he has these other children, really acts as if he's already passed even in life. So there's this concept, the Ramban in uh, looking at the story of Abraham, came up with this idea called the actions of the forefathers are a sign for the descendants. That what one generation does is basically like a little foreshadowing of what every generation is going to go through. And we see that sometimes in families, how intergenerational trauma can be passed from one generation to the next. You might be for an example, you might have grandchildren, or at this point, great grandchildren of Holocaust survivors who are never in their life going to buy a car from Germany. They're just not going to do it. It's how things are passed on generation to generation to generation. And this starts with Abraham, or according to me, I think it starts even further back with Lamech and Terach. And so how do we break this cycle? So I need to, hold on. For some reason, my mouse has disappeared, which is very silly. So I can't really read this whole thing. But so the question is, how do we break the cycle, really? If you see how the cycle is being passed on generation to generation to generation, that is this terrible parent traumatizing the next generation. How do we then break it, right? How do we become the parent or the healer and not just another cog in the wheel parent doomed to repeat the actions of the parents? And to this class's point, is there any hope? What is our hope in breaking that cycle? So flash forward many generations later, we have the book of Judges. So that's after Moses, after Joshua. They're in the land, they've conquered the land, they've settled in the land, and now they're trying to figure out, how do we stay here and how do we govern ourselves? And so they come up with this idea, let's try judges, right? The best judge of all is this fantastic woman named Deborah. So fantastic, it's my daughter's second middle name. And she is sitting by her tree, and you see her in the beginning of the book sitting by her tree, her nice little happy tree, and just kind of relaxing in the shade as people come up to her and try to help solve issues that are going on. So that's Deborah. We're introduced to her. So so in the book of, why am I unable, sorry, so strange. I know you don't know what I'm saying. It's so strange. My mouse disappeared. I'm like trying to minimize so I can see everything. Maybe Rabbi Streifer, could you read this for me? Because I'm like, it's for some reason you're halfway cut off. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank
In the
you.
book of Judges, chapter 4, the Jews are greatly oppressed by Canaanite king Yavin. Prophet Deborah sends a message to the military commander Barak that he is to go into battle against the wicked king. Barak refuses to go unless Deborah goes with him. She consents to go with him, but informs him that his victory will now be in the hands of a woman, Yael, who will drive a tent spike into the head of Sisera, the commander of the enemy army. In chapter 5, the story of Deborah is recounted in the form of an ancient song, Shirat Devorah. The song claims in verse 7, Chadlu parzon b'Yisrael, Chadlu ad shekamti Devorah, shekamti em b'Yisrael.
Right. So here, yeah, so I'll take it up. Thank you. Thank you for helping me out. We're having technical difficulties today. And so this is this verse where I'm saying, how do we break this cycle? So I guess most directly translated, it could mean the rulers ceased in Israel. They ceased. So this is the song celebrating how great Deborah is and her winning this war. That all the rulers ceased, like there was no one to help, right, at all in Israel. They ceased, right? There was this cycle of not helping until you arose, O Deborah, until you arose as a mother in Israel. But I like to translate it slightly differently. So I prefer the translations that the rulers ceased in Israel, they ceased until I arose as Devorah, until Achakamti Devorah, as until I arose, because it's this I language, until I arose myself as Devorah, until I arose as a mother in Israel. That there was no one to help, there was no one to help us get by until I became fully myself, until I arose as myself and I became my own parent, until I was able to be resilient enough to parent myself, or whatever relationship you want to use, right, out of this situation and be a mother, not only for myself, but be the mother, be the healer that everyone else needed me to be, or needed in that moment. So I'm going to stop sharing just for a minute so I can have my maps back, and see if there's any thoughts there before I continue.
And feel free to raise your hand or wave at us if you have a thought to share, or put it into the chat.
And I see now some of your stories of your own personal resilience, and thank you for sharing those. And I hope that they'll keep. Oh,
So, Rabbi Bender, I see Bruce and I see Bob with hands
Bruce,
up. Do you want
Bob.
me to call people?
All right, sure. Thank
So,
you.
Bruce, go ahead, and then Bob.
Thanks. Fascinating story, and thank you for sharing. I was wondering if there was some link that we might make between Deborah and Nachshon in terms of stepping into the breach where there was no one to step into it.
You say, I'm sorry, I can't really hear you. The war where?
I'm suggesting that perhaps there might be a link that we might make between Deborah and Nachshon, in the sense that when no one else is available to step forward, these individuals step forward and take leadership positions.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So you're talking about the crossing of the Red Sea, how Moses was like, "Hey, all right, we're gonna go through the Red Sea, and we're gonna get their dry land. It's gonna be great." And they get to the Red Sea. This is fleeing Exodus, right? And they stop and go, "Well, now what?" Right? It's kind of big. Are we going to swim? We have infants with us. We have very people of all abilities, people of all ages. We have cattle, right? We can't really swim across. We're going to drown. And so there is this midrash you're referring to of Nachshon, right? Who's like, all right, I have faith. I have faith that God's going to split the sea. So walks up to his ankles, right? Walks up to his knees, walks up to his hips, his chest, his shoulders, his neck, and just as the water went above his nose, boom, right? The sea split, right? So standing up, I love that example. I think that's a perfect connection.
I saw Bob next.
Your translation of when I arose as a mother in Israel made me think of something that just came in my inbox today from Tikvah, actually talking about chapter 5 of Pirkei Avot, and the idea about the different characteristics that individual people may have. There are 4 types of this and 4 types of that, in terms of the idea that an individual can choose what characteristics to have, what characteristics to emphasize for themselves, whether they're going to be patient, impatient, or the rest of it. And maybe Deborah, who may have had a variety of characteristics, you showed in the picture that she's hanging out under a tree waiting for people to come and talk to her, but under the circumstances, she was able to choose a different approach and get up and go.
Mm-hmm. Right. And all of us have potentials in us that we can. It's easy to follow the bandwagon, and it's harder to do your own thing. But we might have our own. We can hope for our own personal resilience, or we can hope in our own ability to change or to affect change for ourselves, for others, right? To be the leaders that we need to be and others need us to be. I see Bruce.
Yeah, just to follow up on this, on your theme of hope, and my question, I guess, comes down to how do we attribute these individuals who display a hopeful attitude towards us how do we follow in their footsteps? Where do we find the source of help that they found? How do we find that source of help in us?
So how do you look at others as an example for yourself? I mean, I think that perhaps the answer is even in the question, right? That sometimes you might look around, especially right now, right? I mean, there's so much that could be said about ongoing times and feeling hopeless with the rise of anti-Semitism, with all the news on the media. But then I might see friends, colleagues post just beautiful poetry, right? About why even in times like these, they're able to find hope, and they're able to see, okay, this is what's happening now, but I could see the future, and based on history, I know that things must always get better for the Jewish people. And sometimes even just watching or witnessing others is a bolster of strength for you to find resilience, even if it's not in your personal circle, even if you might be surrounded by a lot of, especially where we are scattered around the country, depending on where we are, we might not be surrounded by people we want to be surrounded by, but by seeing examples of others who have felt that hope, I think that is a perfect way to bolster your hope, to find your own personal reservoirs of resilience and hope. That feels like the question, right? How do we find resilience within ourselves? So that's kind of the end of my slideshow, really. I just wanted to be able to see you again. And can you see it like this? Because then I can actually use my mouse, right? So as you saw from my very unfair pictures, I kind of goaded you with my pictures, right? That she was able to within herself make a conscious active choice, right? To not repeat the doomed fate of Israel over and over and over again that we saw with the patriarchs, that we saw with the Israelites failing again and again in the desert, that we see with other judges who maybe are successful for a minute and then things just all fall apart, right? She makes this active conscious choice to get up from her tree, right? And says, if I have to do it, I'm going to do it right, and I'm going to be a reservoir of hope for myself and for others to follow. And so I know someone said they're not here for psychotherapy. It's not psychotherapy. Judaism, all of this is Judaism too, right? So I think that what Deborah did is not the same as Sigmund Freud, which is depending on other people to help you change. Rather, it's owning the things that are bad and finding truth anyway. So I found this great quote from Brene Brown. The opposite of recognizing that we're feeling something is denying our emotions. The opposite of being curious is disengaging. When we deny our stories and disengage from tough emotions, they don't go away. Instead, they own us, they define us. Our job is not to deny the story, but to defy the ending, to rise strong, recognize our story, and rumble with the truth until we get to a place where we think, yes, that is what happened. This is my truth, and I will choose how this story ends, right? So to look at hard times, to look at times when hope felt the most foreign from us as Jewish people, and to look at those times and to say, yes, those are our stories too, right? Yes, those were tough times, and not to deny and not to say that happened, but here we are, that happened, and that is who we are as well. That is true, but that is not those tough times before. That is not how my story ends now, right? I have the right now I'm in the driver's seat and I get to drive this vehicle. So that was my question. I think we already kind of got there. How do we find tikvah in our own personal resilience? How do we find hope in our own ongoing story and the ongoing story of the Jewish people? Based, like you have found hope in your own stories of personal resilience. And some of you I saw in the chat shared some very powerful stories of personal resilience, familial personal resilience, illness personal resilience. So how do we find hope in our Jewish moment like we did in our own personal resilience? I think we have a couple of minutes to talk about that. I'll see if anything new came into the chat. But we can unmute and share. How do you find hope in this moment similar to the ways that you did in your own personal story?
Well, this folk community is a very important one. And as someone who is sort of in my own diaspora right now, I feel very good about being able to be here and see other people and have discussions like this.
Right. So just like how you can find own communities, even when it feels like you might be in a moment of isolation, you can also think about expanding out to the greater community, the greater Jewish community, relying on the greater Jewish community as home. That could be a way to do that. And I can help you parse it through. If you have half formulated thoughts, I can help you to parse it through. There's such a pull toward the predetermined ending, good or bad. It gives certainty. Inspired by Robert by Rebecca Solnit, who says the future is dark. In other words, we cannot see it clearly. Oh yeah, I get my sermon I gave last year. I talked about how the future is dark, but she says in that quote, the future is dark, but we have these torches, right? We have these torches from the past that are with us that cut the darkness. Is really kind of the other part of Rebecca Solnit's thesis there, that from the past we have these torches that help us whenever times are dark, and I think that's a perfect connection.
Rabbi,
Well,
we have another hand up as well.
yes, sorry. I see. Well, Alfred and then Susan.
I was reflecting on the period after my father's death, which was a very difficult time for me, but I was never truly alone because I would just say that there's something about what you're saying that makes me reflect on whatever our own darkest times have been. There are people surrounding us who are going through dark times and are struggling, and our friends, people we work with, and to keep open to the fact that someone near us is struggling, and a word of comfort, an expression of concern, or finding a way to help is, I think, what we come away from the
Right.
experience of being in darkness ourselves is.
So finding hope that even in your darkness, realizing that you are a human just like the human next to you is a human, and you can find community there. And I think that's an interesting, I think that also relates to what Penina says in the chat. Who was Yael? I mean, Yael is the person who's finding the darkness together with Deborah, right? I think that's a perfect connection. And I saw Susan's hand before. But you're muted. You're muted.
Unmute. All right. In finding resilience, or just what I would say, the ability to continue on or to live with something that's painful when it's not my choice, is just going deeper and deeper inside myself in meditation. And what I have to let go, the quietness that I feel from meditating and feeling part of one is one of my greatest tools.
Yeah. And I think that's similar also to what Brene Brown was talking about. It's that finding hope and finding light through dark times doesn't mean like everything is great now, right? I mean, we can't turn around, look at the world and go, yes, I have found that I'm hopeful that things are going to get better, but I can't look at the world and go, everything is hunky dory, right? No, I mean, there also is a coming to terms with what the reality is, and still sitting with that, sitting with the feelings, really experiencing those feelings, not suppressing them, letting go, as you said, when you need to. I mean, I probably cried at least once this week just looking at the news. I mean, that's just, I'm a human being, and yet you can find endless reserves within yourself, within community, and making your own community wherever you might be able to find it. Well, I know that's 12:31. I think that might be a good place to leave. And I just thank you for, this might have been off the beaten path, maybe, but I just thank you for, yeah, you've done it. You've done it once, you can do it again, right? That's me. And I'd always love to continue the question and talk about this. And it was just such a pleasure to have a short conversation with you today.
Let me say thank you to Rabbi Chaya Bender. This was really wonderful, and I appreciate everybody who was vulnerable and who contributed and who participated in this conversation. Have a really wonderful rest of your week, everyone. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.